Hey everybody, this is Johnny Valentine. I'd like to welcome you to the first in a series of screencasts, webcasts, recordings, whatever you like to call them, about SCCM. We'll be going through learning together about SCCM, how it can help us, how to configure it, things we can do with it, etc. This is the first one of the broadcasts on this subject, hence the O1, providing an overview. If you're familiar with SCCM, you may or may not want to skip on. In later videos in this series, we'll be doing lots of demonstrations, lots of hands-on, lots of showing you how to use the product. In this first one, it's very much just an overview, just a presentation to let you understand what it is we'll be doing, what we have, what the purpose of SCCM is. So we have an agenda for this. About this course, which we've pretty much just covered, what SCCM is, what functionalities it provides, how to license it, difference between current servicing branch, long-term servicing branch, the roles that we have to deploy on the services, and what's new when comparing it to the old edition. So if you're comfortable with all of that, then my advice is to skip this video, go on to the next one. If you're totally new to SCCM, then really what we need to do is have a think about what it provides you with. So about this course is a free to view course provided to you over YouTube. There's no sign up fees, you don't have to provide any of your own details. What I provide is an overview of the technology with details on how to install it and start using it. This course is presented and run from a single PC. It's got a 6-core processor and 64 gig of RAM together with a local hard drive. And what this means is that what you see in this course, you can likely do on a machine at home to get some training, get up to speed with the product. Our scenario covers a small business using SCCM. I don't like to say the number of users or endpoints, as that may lead you to think that you can't use this information that's in this course for larger implementations. The demos that we do in the course can be replicated on your own hardware, and even with less RAM than we've got. We've got 64 gig of RAM, but if you've got less, then you can assign this. They'll probably just take longer to run, or you can just spin the whole thing up in the cloud. If you like what you see as we work our way through, then all I ask you to do is give a thumbs up sign below. And if you'd like to be notified when there's more videos added, then yeah, please subscribe to the channel. So what is SCCM? SCCM is System Center Configuration Manager. Is part of the System Center suite of products. So Operations Manager, Data Protection Manager, Virtual Machine Manager, Orchestrator, things like that. As the product name says, it allows us to manage the configuration of endpoints, files, software updates and registry settings, and enforce those settings where required. While it can be used for managing servers, the recommended route for managing configuration of servers is the desired configuration state, or desired state configuration rather, with PowerShell. What SCCM does fundamentally is it increases IT productivity and efficiency by reducing manual tasks. So it allows us to automate things and turn our IT from just being clunky standalone manual into a strategic asset. And what it fundamentally does is it enables a right first time, every time IT provision. So if you're used to deploying hardware by hand, vendors install. A lot of people, first thing they do when they get a new laptop for the business is they go and wipe it, go and install stuff by hand. That can take a long time. You forget things. When you're installing the software, you have to find a disk, find the license keys, you have to remember how to configure it. Thousands and thousands of key pushes, values and settings that you have to put in. And inevitably, we're all human, something goes wrong. So what SCCM does is it reduces the time. So certainly reduces the engineer time. Just press a couple of buttons and it goes and builds for you. It reduces issues for the end user because everything's configured the same way every time because it's automated. Provides certainty, reduction in cost, reduction in time. You can download a trial if you like to work through this series with me from this location. I'll just leave it on the screen for a moment so that you can screenshot it. So what functionality do we get from SCCM? We can deploy bare metal operating systems, go and deploy new computers, thin clients, fat clients, workstations, laptops, tablets, and in some cases phones. We can manage applications, so application lifecycle, we can deploy them, we can update them, we can uninstall them, we can configure them. We can controlled access to company resources by deploying connection settings to users, so that users can connect in. Compliance settings, if a computer doesn't look like this, remediate it so that it does. Endpoint protection can push out antivirus or anti-malware, so System Center endpoint protection can push that out and configure it on endpoints. We can take an inventory so we know what we've got, where it is, where it's being plugged in, which subnet, who's using it, what they're using on the endpoint. If we use Intune, get full-on mobile device management for a complete range of phone types such as iOS, Android, Windows, etc. New to the 2016 version, using your on-premises implementation of SCCM, we can do mobile device management for Windows 10 mobile devices. Power management, very important in some organisations, especially where you've got thousands and thousands of computers. People go home, leave them switched on, cost you a small fortune. So we can power them down out of hours. Typical scenario would be in education, all the kids just go home, walk out the lesson, leave everything running. Save the teacher or someone else having to go around and power everything down. You can just do that automatically. Offering support to people, remote control, so we can take control of their session, help them out, fix things, give them guidance, training on how to do things, help resolve help desk tickets. Said remote connection profiles, whole raft of reporting. All of the data is held in a SQL database so that we can query it. We can meter our software usage as well, so only a certain number of people can use the software, know how much software we're using, etc. We can deploy software updates, Windows updates. With third-party plugins, we can issue software updates for almost for well-known packages, such as Adobe and Java. And because we can fundamentally deploy things with SCCM, you can deploy any software update. Just consider it another piece of software that you deploy. And we can configure user data and profile configuration items. So shared directories, user home drives, roaming profiles, etc. So we have all of this goodness. We can go and deploy it. Someone's got to pay for it. Let's have a quick talk about licensing. So licensing for 2016, it's changed since the 2012 edition. It's purchased parts of the System Center suite, so you can't just buy SCCM, you have to buy the whole lot. Comes in two primary editions, Data Center Edition and Standard Edition. Now with System Center 2012, you used to have to buy a minimum of 2 CPU licenses, so 2 sockets. With Data Center, you could, if you bought 2 CPUs, then you could run an unlimited number of operating system environments, OSEs, on that server host. So when we're talking about licensing, we're talking about licensing not the SCCM servers, but any servers that are controlled by SCCM. So for example, for endpoint protection, deployment, etc. Or for System Center itself, of which SCCM is a part. Or you could buy Standard Edition, which just lets you license 2 operating system environments. So if you're running a bare metal hypervisor and you've got 4 virtual machines running on it, you could just buy 2 lots of Standard Edition and license those. What's changed with 2016 for the licensing is it's no longer licensed per CPU, per socket, now licensed per core. So Microsoft say this is to allow you to transfer your licensing to the cloud where all the VMs are run per core. I say that Microsoft had a problem with CPUs getting more and more cores over the years. And so because you could put more VMs onto a single host, they were getting less licensing revenue for System Center as servers were becoming more powerful. And so as you went from 4 cores per CPU to 6 to 8 to 10 to 12 and up to 16 cores per CPU, then there's a heck of a difference between, even 10 cores per CPU and 4 that they're originally charging for. In other words, they were getting less than half their licensing revenue. So I say that they've made the change to make sure that they can charge more as the more cores you add in. So they keep getting their revenue, no more than that. So anyway, you now have to license at least 16 cores per server with at least 2 physical processors if you want Data Center Edition, and that's okay. You can see from the screen that Data Center Edition is almost 3 times the amount of money as Standard Edition is, so there's clearly a breakpoint for do you license the whole host or do you license the virtual machines running on that host. Breakpoint is around, goodness me, well, as it's 3 times the amount, you're looking at about 5 virtual machines. If you're running more than 5 virtual machines, you may as well buy the Data Center Edition. If you're running 5 virtual machines or less, you may as well buy the Standard Edition. That's for machine licensing, covering servers. And remember, this is licensing for the whole System Center suite, not just for Configuration Manager. If you're running clients, such as Windows 10 laptops, for example, then the machine licensing doesn't count for them. You want client machine licensing, CML, and down the bottom you can see how that's licensed. So for an individual client, the price for Configuration Manager, allowing you to configure, manage and support that endpoint, is $62 per endpoint at list. You may well pay a lot less depending on your licensing agreement. If you just want the antivirus element, then it's $22 list. And again, you may pay less. So essentially, the System Center servers themselves, the management servers running System Center, you can deploy as many of those as you like. You don't need any licenses if you're just using it to control client machines. In other words, you can have the whole System Center suite if it's only managing one endpoint for $62. That includes SQL, Operations Manager, Configuration Manager, etc. Generally speaking, though, you're going to want the System Center suite to manage all of your servers as well, which is why we go through the other licensing. So bottom line, running virtualized, you probably want to buy Data Center Edition. If you're running physical servers, you should cover those with Standard Edition. And for your user endpoints, you will need the CML. CML you can either buy directly, or you can buy it as part of the Core Cow suite or the Enterprise Cow suite. So if you're already running Core Cow to give you Office and operating system and Exchange and things like that, you may already be licensed for this. Just another quick slide there just to explain how it rolls through, differences between 2016 and 2012 R2. As you can see, if you've got one processor with 10 cores on there, then you don't need to buy any additional licenses. If you've got 2 processors, each with 8 cores, you don't have to buy any additional licenses as you would have done from 2012 R2. But if you start going up to 10 cores per processor, then you do. And you know, if you've got 4 processors, each with 16 cores, then because they're multiples of 8, again, you'd have had to buy no extra licenses, because you'd have had to buy 4 licenses with 2012 R2. But as you go up to more cores per processor, as soon as you start breaching that 8, you're likely to have to start buying more licenses. Right then, so CSB, LTSB, current service branch, current servicing branch, and long-time servicing branch. So SCCM 2012 R2 was the last version of SCCM. SCCM 2016 doesn't really exist. It's just SCCM now. There is no year to add on. It's just SCCM. And you are either within software assurance, so you're entitled to upgrade, or you're not covered by software assurance, in which case you're not allowed to upgrade the software. So current servicing branch, you're covered by your software assurance and you can put in the latest version. And no software assurance, you're at a fixed point in time, you've got a perpetual license, you can only use the long-term servicing branch. So the CSB requires SA, LTSB is for people without SA, but the real difference between them is that the long-term servicing branch stops at that point in time because you're not entitled to any upgrades. So what is it that we lose? I'll leave that on the screen for a moment for you just to read. Or you can pause the video and then play and we can move on afterwards. So essentially what you lose is if there's external services that are being updated, such as Office 365, for example, that you're connecting to, then you can't do that with the LTSB. The code is frozen at a point in time, so any changes that are made in that remote service, you won't be updated to use. So if you're just using it in-house, it'll be fine, and you might get the odd issue with Windows 10. What can I tell you? But other than that, you'll be fine. So generally speaking though, why wouldn't you want to use the latest version? Why wouldn't you want to pay for support and keep it being updated? But fundamentally, it comes down to Microsoft wanting to sell licensing again. So they're encouraging you to have the software assurance. What roles are there in System Center Configuration Manager? There are a whole raft of roles that we can install. So you can install the whole lot on one server, or you can install multiple instances of various roles, and you can also deploy a hierarchy of servers so that you have a central site, for example, that can control a number of primary sites, and each of those primary sites can control secondary sites, and in this way you can scale up the solution to hundreds of thousands of endpoints. If you are planning on deploying SCCM to scale up to hundreds of thousands of endpoints, then watching free videos on YouTube is probably not the way to go. You probably want to get yourself on a proper course, get some proper experience before you start designing for that. If, however, you've just got a few hundred users, even a couple of thousand users, what you see in these videos will see you through, so that you can deploy and maintain quite happily. So there's various different roles: the configuration, site server, site system roles. So your site server is your central server that controls everything. Configuration manager, site database server, or SQL by another name. S provider, allowing you to connect to the database from an endpoint that is not the site server. So this introduces redundancy into the solution. So now you can connect from almost anywhere. Application catalog web service and website point, complementary services. So the web service allows users to connect in and select applications for install by themselves. The website point allows the software center client on their machine to do the same thing. Certificate registration point, for example, mobile devices connecting with NDES to go and sign up for a new certificate to allow them to connect in. Distribution point is what it's always been, allowing you endpoints to connect to the distribution point to pick up operating system deployment binaries, software installation files to go and install things. Endpoint protection point, antivirus reporting services point, going to get reports and running reports. There are a whole raft of roles that can be installed. We'll be going through these throughout the videos in the series, but it's just to be aware that everything that you do in SCCM is deployed and presented as a role. You deploy those roles, you configure those roles, you then get that functionality. You don't deploy those roles, you don't configure those roles, you don't get that functionality. So you can deploy as much functionality or as little functionality as you like. You can make it as highly available as you like, and you can scale it as much as you like. The more horsepower you put behind it, the more you can scale. The more instances of a role that you deploy, the more availability you get. So for those of you who have stayed the course right to the end, what's new in SCCM 2016 over 2012 R2? So you can now update from the console rather than having to download SCCM. You just go into the console, check that there's a new version. New version comes out most months. There is some sort of update coming through. So at the moment there's 1606, 1607, 1608, 1609. And you can update from there straight inside the console. Indeed, unless it's a major release such as 1606, you can't download it and update. You have to do it from inside the console. It's only when there's a major release, so 1511, 1602 and 1606 were major releases, that You could, in fact, 1602 wasn't. 1602 you have to do inside the console as well. So 1511 and 1606 that you can download and install. The Microsoft Intune connector, if you want to connect SCCM up to Intune to allow you to fully manage your mobile endpoints, offer remote support, etc., etc. That's being replaced now by the service connection point role. Support of interactive management technology is improved, but now requires a plug-in. So if you've got Intel-enabled AMT computers, then you can do out-of-band management of them when they're not even in the building. So even if they're powered off, so long as they're connected in to a cable and you can get to them, then you can manage those. Even if the operating system dies, you can manage them. What it does do is it turns off the out-of-band management inside SCCM though. So if you do deploy this, then it's an all or nothing thing. You either need to have everyone on AMT, or you accept that you won't manage out-of-band the non-AMT clients. Always been a pain through the years deploying the SCCM client, because it's always been all or nothing. You update the SCCM client, it goes up and updates all of the endpoints connecting to SCCM. So new to the latest version, you can now deploy the client to a subset of computers for pre-prod. So you can test the client before you roll it out of where. Operating system deployments now include a new task sequence that allows for upgrading of Windows 10 from Windows 7. Windows PE peer cache. It's always been difficult to do operating system deployments in local sites where you haven't got a distribution point, because it's got to pull the operating system deployment, it's got to pull the WIM files across the WAN, and they can be huge, several gig, so not good. Windows PE peer cache, if someone else has built a machine, then you can pull that from their machine rather than having to pull it across the WAN. Support for universal Windows platform applications. So big drive for Microsoft to become more Apple-like. So their applications write once, run anywhere. So if you write an application for a PC, you can run it on one of their tablets, Surface Book, Windows Phone. So if you are using those applications, if you want to sideload them because you develop them in-house, SCCM now supports that sort of application. Windows 10 computers, if you're doing updates for business, Windows updates for business, you don't have to have them managed along with your other Windows 10 devices. WSUS cleanups now in the console, so rather than having to manage things through WSUS, you can now clean up WSUS from within the console. You click a button, it goes through, it identifies all the superseded updates, and it marks those as declined, so that they're automatically declined. When a WSUS engine on a client machine goes and checks what updates it needs, it then doesn't check for those updates, knowing that they're no longer pertinent. So it makes the checking for updates, deployment of updates, that much cleaner and quicker. And you can now do that right from in the console. Support for authentication for Windows Hello. So doing all of the looking at your face, your happy smiley face, and authenticating, you can do that now with SCCM. Various updates to device management with Intune, such as you can ask people now to click on to agree to your licensing terms before they can enroll or install any of your software. So nice set of improvements, things like that. And as I said, big one is mobile devices. As long as they're Windows 10, you can now manage those on premises. So hope you've enjoyed this very quick walkthrough. That's SCCM 2016. It's what this series is going to be about, is to help you get to know SCCM, how to deploy SCCM, configure it, run it, manage it, and hopefully make your life easier. Hope you come back for the next in the series, and see you soon. I've been Johnny Valentine. Bye.